this unit, you are going to learn about relative pronouns and their use in complex sentences. Relative clauses give additional information about a person, place, or thing mentioned in a sentence. They are introduced by relative pronouns. The relative pronouns are who, whom, whose, which, and that. When, where, and why can be used when referring to times, places, and reasons. Relative pronouns can be the subjects or objects of verbs and the objects of prepositions. They are invariable. The same relative pronouns refer to both singular and plural nouns. Who and whom are used for people. Which refers to things. That can often be used in place of which and whom, and can sometimes be used in place of who. We'll look at rules about the use of that after we have studied the difference between defining and non-defining relative clauses. Whose indicates possession or relationship. One way to give additional information about a person or a thing mentioned in a sentence is to use a relative clause. A defining relative clause is one which explains which person or thing you are talking about. If you say, "I saw a girl," it would not necessarily be clear which girl you meant. In a case like this, you could make it clear by adding a defining relative clause. I saw a girl who used to be at school with me. Non-defining relative clauses give additional information which is not essential for the identification of the person or thing you are talking about. If you say, "I saw Mary Smith," it is clear who you mean, but you might want to add further information in a non-defining relative clause. I saw Mary Smith, who used to be at school with me. You may be wondering why you need to know whether you are using a defining or non-defining relative clause. What difference does it make? There are differences in punctuation. A non-defining relative clause is normally set off from the rest of the sentence with commas, unless it comes at the end of the sentence, when it is preceded by a comma and followed by a full stop. No punctuation is used to separate a defining relative clause from the rest of the sentence. There are differences in speech. We normally pause before and after a non-defining relative clause, but not when there is a defining relative clause. There are grammatical differences. That can replace which, who, or whom only in defining relative clauses. In defining relative clauses, the relative pronoun can sometimes be omitted, but in non-defining relative clauses, the pronoun can never be omitted. Defining relative clauses can be used after pronouns, but non-defining clauses are never used after pronouns. Let's look now at how relative pronouns are used in defining relative clauses. When you are referring to a person or to people, you can use who or that as the subject of the clause. Who is more common in writing, while that is often used in conversation. Both of the following sentences are correct, but the first would be used in more formal discourse. The people who live next door come from Uruguay. The people that live next door come from Uruguay. Whom can be used as the object of the clause. In informal writing and in conversation, it would be unusual to use whom. Who or that would normally be used. A man whom I know comes from Venezuela is correct but unusual. So say, a man who I know comes from Venezuela. A man that I know comes from Venezuela. Directly after a preposition, whom must be used. It is not possible to use who or that. Some friends to whom I gave a cat have just sent me a photo of it. This sounds very formal, and often we avoid using whom by placing the preposition at the end of the clause. Some friends who, that, I gave a cat to have just sent me a photo of it. When referring to a thing or things, which or that can always be used in defining clauses as subjects. She can't find the book, which, that, was on the table. And as objects, she's lost the book that, which, she bought yesterday. Both which and that are correct. That is used more frequently in informal writing and speaking. However, that cannot be placed directly after a preposition. Only which can be used as the object of a preposition. This is the house in which I spent my childhood. In conversation, we often place the preposition at the end of the clause, and in this case, either which or that can be used. This is the office that, which, I work in. Whose, used together with a singular or plural noun, can refer to people or things. It can be the subject or the object of a verb. I met the people whose mother used to work with mine. I phoned the girl whose purse I had found. When whose is the object of a preposition, the preposition can be placed either at the beginning of the clause, before whose. I wrote to the people in whose house I had stayed. Or it can be placed at the end of the clause. I wrote to the people whose house I had stayed in. In defining relative clauses, when can only be used when the clause is preceded by the word time or by the name of a period of time such as day or year. Write and tell me the time when I should meet you. It was a day when I was very busy. In defining relative clauses, where can be used only if it is preceded by the word place or by the name of a kind of place such as city or building. This is the place where we were supposed to meet. He has always lived in the town where he was born. Why can only be used in defining relative clauses and only after the word reason. That's the reason why I've asked to speak to him. Why can be omitted with no change in meaning. Defining relative clauses can be used after pronouns like no one, someone, anyone, everyone, and nothing, something, anything, everything, and are sometimes used after some, many, much, several, all, and those. I know someone who lived in San Francisco. I couldn't find anyone who had information. You can help yourself to anything that you want. Those who are against hunting usually have strong feelings on the subject. It is also possible to use defining relative clauses after personal pronouns I, you, he, she, it, we, they. But nowadays this is rarely done. It sounds rather old-fashioned. He who hesitates is lost. Note that it is not possible to use who at the beginning of a sentence. You can only use who, even in a general sense, after a noun like people, a pronoun like everyone, those, all those, or, as we've just seen, after a personal pronoun. Who wants to go on the class trip must sign up by Friday is a mistake. All those who want to go on the class trip must sign up by Friday is correct. Who lives in glass houses shouldn't throw stones is a mistake. People who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones is correct. We have seen that in defining relative clauses, that can replace who, whom, which as the subject or the object of a relative clause. The exception is when the relative pronoun comes directly after a preposition, when you must use whom for people and which for things. That is not used in non-defining relative clauses. Now we are going to look at cases when the use of that is preferred. There are a number of words which, or that, are normally followed by that and not by another relative pronoun. All, any, anything, every, everything, some, something, no, nothing, none, little, few, much, not much, only. Here are some examples. It's something that I've always wanted to do. Nothing that we do seems to matter. Is this all that there is to eat? There was not much that we could do. After superlatives, if we use a relative pronoun, we normally use that. It's the best book that I've ever read. She's the best teacher that I've ever had. However, in defining relative clauses, we can omit the relative pronoun if it is the object of the clause. A man I know comes from Venezuela. Some friends I gave a cat to have just sent me a photo of it. She's lost the book I gave her yesterday. This is the office I work in. After superlatives, relative pronouns are frequently omitted. It's the best film I've seen this year. She's one of the silliest people I know. The relative pronoun cannot be omitted when it is the subject of a clause. Here are some examples. The people who live next door come from Uruguay. She can't find the book that was on the table. The safer choice is always to use a relative pronoun because it is never a mistake to do so. But it sounds much more natural to omit the relative pronoun when it can be omitted, so you should try to do this. A non-defining relative clause must be introduced by a relative pronoun. It cannot be omitted. That cannot be used. When you are referring to a person or to people, you use who as the subject of a non-defining relative clause. My brother, who was only 12 at the time, won the poetry prize. When referring to people, whom or who is used as the object of the relative clause. Jane, who or whom I haven't seen for a number of years, is going to visit us this summer. When referring to things, which is used, whether it is the subject or object of the clause. The company, which was founded in 1973, has just opened a new office in Chicago. The building, which the City Council uses for its meetings, is open to the public on Saturday mornings. Prepositions can be placed at the end of a clause. The proposal, which I essentially agree with, needs to be explained more clearly. Non-defining relative clauses are usually used in formal written style, where the preposition is frequently placed before the relative pronoun. The proposal, with which I essentially agree, needs to be explained more clearly. Whose can be used in non-defining clauses as the subject. John, whose brother works with me, is a champion skier, as the object. This is Jim, whose brother you met last summer, or as the object of a preposition. Mary, in whose car we came, thinks we should leave. Mary, whose car we came in, thinks we should leave. When and where can be used in non-defining clauses. We'll have lunch at 1 o'clock when the conference ends. We'll meet in room 12 where coffee will be served. We met in London where I was studying. In general, we understand that a relative clause refers to the noun that immediately precedes the clause. In the sentence which follows, the clause refers to the noun luggage. The airline lost my luggage, which I had clearly labelled. In some cases, however, the clause can refer to the entire sentence that it follows. In the next sentence, the clause refers not to the luggage, but to the fact that it was lost. The airline lost my luggage, which I found very annoying. In sentences like this, you must use which and cannot use that. You must use a comma before the relative clause. What can be used at the beginning of clauses, but there is an important difference between what and the relative pronouns which and that. Which and that refer to a preceding noun, while what replaces a noun and includes the meaning of the noun. What can replace both singular or plural nouns. Compare the sentences in each of the sets below. The waiter brought us the food that we had ordered. The waiter brought us what we had ordered. I'll show you the presents that I received. I'll show you what I received. In other words, we can use what in place of a noun, but we cannot use what to refer to a noun. The waiter brought us the food what we had ordered is a mistake. Nor can we use what after a pronoun. Is this all what there is to eat? Is a mistake. We do not use that when no noun is referred to. The waiter brought us that which we had ordered is a mistake. that is the end of the lesson. Now you can do the exercises on the grammar points presented in this unit.